Hello everyone, I Dr. Ruchi Agarwal welcome you to web-based programming class. Today we will be discussing about web server. I'm going to discuss about web server, working of web server, architecture of web server, local and remote server. So first coming to web server. Web server is a computer where web content is stored. It allows you to serve content over internet using hypertext markup language. Like we create web pages with the help of HTML, and pages must be organized and stored at a central computer. And the organization of web pages into directories and files are stored on hard disk of central computer. This is called website creation. Computers which store web pages in the form of directories and files and provide these files to be read are called servers. They act like service providers that service the need for information. The server computer runs a special software called web server software that allows website management, accept a client request for information, respond to client request by providing the page with the required information. So web server is a server software or hardware dedicated to running the software that can satisfy client request on the World Wide Web. Web server can in general contain one or more websites, and web server processes incoming network requests over HTTP and several other related protocols. So web server respond to client request in either of the following two ways: sending the file to the client associated with the requested URL, generating response by invoking a script and communicating it. Primary function of web server is to store, process and deliver web pages to clients. The communication between client and server take place using HTTP, and pages are delivered using most frequently HTML documents, which may include images, style sheets, scripts in addition to the text content. Coming to the working of web server. When clients send request for a web page, the web server searches for the requested page. If requested page is found, then it will send it to the client with an HTTP response. If requested web page is not found, web server will send an HTTP response error 404 not found. If client has requested for some other resources, then the web server will contact to the application server and data is stored to construct the HTTP response. So HTTP request is sent from web client to web server. Static data request sent to static data store, and then through static data response from web server to the web client through HTTP response. Servlet request is sent from web server to application server, and servlet response is sent back from the application server to the web server. Coming to web server architecture. Web server architecture follows the following two approaches: concurrent approach, single process, event-driven approach. Let's discuss about concurrent approach in detail. Concurrent approach allows the web server to handle multiple client requests at the same time. It can be achieved by the following methods: multi-process, multi-threaded, hybrid method. First, let's discuss about multiprocessing. In this, a single process or parent process initiates several single-threaded child processes and distribute incoming requests to these child processes. Each of the child processes are responsible for handling single request. It is the responsibility of parent process to monitor the load and decide if processes should be killed or forked. Multi-threaded. Unlike multi-process, it creates multiple single-threaded process. Last one is the hybrid approach. It is the combination of above two approaches. In this approach, multiple processes are created and each process initiates multiple threads. Each of the threads handles one connection. Using multiple threads in single process results in less load on system resources. Coming to local and remote server. Local server have a server setup on your current machine. When the server is remote, this just means that it is another computer. In the same case, if server hosting your files is not in-house or on your computer, it is considered to be a remote server. So understanding the difference between local server and remote server is very important. If you are referring to a local server, this means that you have a server set up on your current machine. When the server is remote, this just means that it is on another computer. You may have heard the phrase working remotely. What this means is that the person will not be working in the office. Instead, they would be working at home or from their some favorite coffee shop or somewhere else. So since that person is away from the office, they are considered remote. In the same case, if a server hosting your files is not in-house or on your computer, it is considered to be remote server. First, let's talk about what happens when you visit a web page in your browser. Well, your computer needs to contact a remote server on the web and then sends the data back to your computer. But when you are running a local server, your computer contacts itself since it is running a local server and returns data back to the browser. As shown in this figure also, your browser is connecting to your local server. Your machine is running a web browser and a web server and displays the data in the browser. So both are running on the same system. While in case of remote server, we have separate machines. So that's the basic of local server versus remote server. It is very simple concept, but sometimes the jargon seems to be a little cumbersome. So just remember that a local server is on your computer and a remote server is on another computer. Here we are seeing that your browser is connecting to a server. It requests a page. Server sends back the requested page. So here your machine is running the web browser and your server machine is running a web server. Actually, web server is responsible for sending web pages to a browser on the client. And when browser communicates with the web server, it results into four-step HTTP transaction. So client browser retrieves a web page from the server and displays the web page in the browser. Like first step is, first we have to connect. Client has to connect with the web server and request, and then server has to reply to the client, and then after that, after receiving the response by the client, connection has to be closed. So first, when you establish the connection, client and server exchange some information. They must first establish connection. So TCP IP is used to let computers establish a link between the web server and the web browser over the internet. And to communicate with the web server, client machine must be given the IP address of the server along with the sub protocol that must be used like HTTP or FTP, etc. Client server will attempt to locate the server based on the IP address supplied and establish a connection. So web server supports multiple protocol like HTTP and FTP. So Once the connection is established, then client will issue a request and the server will send the response. Each web server controls a website, and from the collection of several web pages, or you can say the website, one page is treated as the default web document. When a web browser connects to the web server using an appropriate protocol name, IP address, and port number, and the web server treats this connection to be the request for the default web document. The web server then dispatches the default web document to the client who is connected. If the client requires viewing any other web page, then client can specify the web page name along with the connection information. So the complete connection and web page information will now be specified as protocol : server name : port number / web page name. So as you know that web page, apart from text and HTML tag, also include references to external objects like JPG file, audio file, video file, and so on. So the request for the web page can be now twofold: the web page itself and the request for the object referenced by the web page, like video file, JPG, or any other files. So when it is appropriately structured, HTTP request is received from a browser. Web server will try to locate the web page as requested, and if the web page exists, the server responds by providing the page to the browser. And if the page is not found, appropriate error message will be sent as a response to the browser request. And after sending the web page to the web server, it resets the connection with the browser. After receiving web page, browser will identify the external objects that are specified in the web page, if it is any, and request the server to deliver the external objects. So such a request will result in a connection being re-established with the web server and a request being sent by the browser. Web server responds to the request being sent by the browser. Now server will terminate the connection. So it is the responsibility of the server to terminate the TCP IP connection with the browser after it responds to the browser's request. So both the browser and the web server must manage an unexpected closing of the connection as well. So if the user clicks on the browser stop button, browser must close the connection. This is how it will work. We have popular web server softwares. Web server softwares stores and manages web pages. When requested, web servers accept requests for these web pages, retrieve these web pages from its hard disk, and sends page back to the client who requested for it. So there are 4 popular web servers. There are others also: Internet Information Server, Microsoft Personal Web Server, Apache Web Server, Netscape Server. We are going to discuss them in detail along with their installation in the next lecture. Thank you very much. Have a good day.